Let's now go over PGY2320 2023 test 1. Carotenoids are derived from the dash pathway and plays important roles in photosynthesis and plant growth. Now, when we look at carotenoids, these are just lipids that give color to fruits, and these ones are derived from what we call isoprenoid pathway. So that is going to be answer for that one. Which of the following genes, HIV genes, encode for the HIV envelope protein? Now the HIV itself has got an envelope, and that envelope is going to be encoded in by the gene ENV. Number 3, lipids are better storage macromolecules than sugars because they are dash and therefore do not interact with cellular water. And the reason as to why lipids do not interact with cellular water is because they are hydrophobic, and because of that, they are good storage macromolecules. They cannot affect the way water is going to be distributed in the body. Water is considered a universal solvent due to its ability to form dash with other compounds. Water can form hydrogen bonds with other compounds, and because of that, it can dissolve almost anything that has got polar bonds. An IV injection with bovine parathyroid hormone followed by measurement of urinary CAMP can be used to differentiate between idiopathic hyperthyroidism and when you use an IV injection of bovine parathyroid hormone and then you measure urinary CMP, you can differentiate idiopathic hyperthyroidism and idiopathic hypothyroidism, which we also call surgical hypothyroidism. So you are differentiating the idiopathic hyper from hypoparathyroidism. Number 6. Endergonic reactions result in the formation of a product with a dash NH content. Now, if you hear that a reaction is endergonic, say you are having A going into B, it means that its change in energy is positive. That is endergonic. That reaction absorbs energy. Now, change in energy is given by the energy of the product minus the energy of the reactant. The only way you can subtract product from minus reactant and you get a positive value is that the product should be high in energy while the reactant should be low in energy. This means that this reaction is gaining energy. That is endergonic. The delta H is positive. So meaning that the energy content and endergonic reaction result in the formation of a product with a, you could look at the product with a high energy content. Number 7, which of the following is true? Ferritin is an example of a protein that transports iron. This statement is true. Ferritin transports iron. Sorting out leads to precipitation. This is also true. Sorting out and also sorting in will actually lead to precipitation. Polar amino acids are generally located at the periphery of protein structures. This is also true. The hydrophobic ones are going to be located more interiorly of a protein structure. Amino acids H can act either as a base or an acid. This is true. Histidine at a pH of 7 acts both as an acid and as a base. It's amphipathic. Actually is amphoteric. Which of the processes needs to occur for a nucleoside analog to function? A nucleoside analog is a compound that resembles a nucleoside. And so for a nucleoside analog, for it to function, it needs to undergo phosphorylation. Denaturation can affect primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary protein levels. True or false? Now, this statement is false. Denaturation does not break peptide bonds. Peptide bonds are what makes up a primary structure. Denaturation can only affect tertiary, quaternary, and secondary structures. Name the glycoconjugate which is made up of sialic acid and glycosphingolipid. Now, this is basically a glycosaminoglycan. Glycosaminoglycans are made up of proteins, Actually, not a glycosaminoglycans, but a glycolipid. Glycolipids are going to be made up of carbohydrates and lipids. Now, to be specific, that carbohydrate you are using is a salicylic acid, and that lipid you are using is a glycosphingolipid. That glycolipid that you have formed is known as a ganglioside. Essential fatty acids include essential fatty acids are fatty acids that cannot be made by the body, and so they have to be obtained in the diet. They include linoleic acid and linolenic acid. Which of the following are examples of epimers? Epimers are compounds which have got the same atoms, number of atoms, but they will differ with the arrangement of atoms at only one carbon. Galactose and fructose, these ones are not epimers, they are structural isomers. Glucose and mannose are epimers, they actually differ only at carbon number 2. If OH is on the right for glucose, it's going to be on the left for mannose. Glucose and galactose, these guys are actually also structural isomers and also stereoisomers because they'll just differ at one carbon number 4, the way atoms are arranged facing either up or down. But glucose and galactose are also actually epimers. They differ at carbon number 4. If in glucose OH is on the left, it's going to be on the right in galactose. Glucose and fructose, they are also structural isomers. Cholera enterotoxin activates adenyl cyclase enzyme, resulting in an increase in which nucleotide? So the cholera enterotoxin will activate adenyl cyclase, and that is going to result in an increase of CAMP, and that actually promotes just the entry of water into the lumen of the intestines, and that is what leads to diarrhea. Number 15, name a protein used for mechanical support and structure support. Protein for structure and mechanical support, that is collagen. Cysteine. An electromotive force refers to the difference in protein gradient generated in the mitochondria during oxidative phosphorylation. Okay, this is not false, this is true. So when there is a difference in proton gradient, says this is the mitochondria, you have got hydrogen ions here, hydrogen ions in the intermembranous space. This will mean that the intermembranous space is going to have positive charges, and then the mitochondria matrix is going to have negative charges. So this creates a difference in charges and a proton gradient, and that forms an electromotive force. The energy produced when electrons move towards a more electronegative species, and of course, this is what is going to be happening in the mitochondria. Electrons are going to be moving from one electron carrier to the next. The next is always having a greater affinity for the electrons. The ability of a species to be reduced, creating a reduction potential. Okay. So what is to be reduced? Reduction is gain in electrons. So when there is the creation of a reduction potential, that is what we call an electromotive force. The energy produced when electron carriers release electrons into the electron transport chain. This is of course true. So that energy produced, that is an electromotive force. Name the enzyme that will be elevated in metastatic carcinoma of the prostate. Now, in metastatic carcinoma of the prostate, just from the word prostate, the enzyme that is going to be elevated here is a phosphatase. Remember, enzymes end in a in ASE. So that's a phosphatase. I've written a phosphase. That's phosphatase, not phosphase. Number 19. Which of the following statements is true? Aspartic acid is an uncharged derivative of asparagine. Now, if you hear of amino acid which have got acid, you have got aspartic acid and glutamic acid. They are of course uncharged derivatives, but they come from aspartic acid comes from aspartate, not from asparagine. And then glutamic acid comes from glutamate. Arginine is conditionally essential amino acid. This is true. Arginine is conditionally essential. Alpha amanitin can be found in some antibiotics. This is true. Alpha amanitin is also found in mushrooms. Ninhydrin reaction targets peptide bonds. This is not true. Ninhydrin reaction targets amine groups and also carboxyl groups. Number 20. What targets peptide bonds is the Barrett reagent. The signaling molecule prostaglandin E is involved in the following signaling pathways: vasodilation. Now, prostaglandins are involved in the contraction of smooth muscles. Now, to vasodilation is a process where smooth muscles relax. When they relax, they end up being big. So this is not constriction, unless if it was vasoconstriction, because blood vessels have got smooth muscles. So if the smooth muscles and blood vessels they contract, that is known as vasoconstriction. Constriction of airways. Now, what is causing the constriction of airways? If it is smooth muscles, then that statement is true. Muscle construction. Okay, now this is statement muscle construction. Supposed to be muscle contraction, not construction. Increase platelet recruitment. So the recruitment of platelets, that's not a function. Which of the following is true? Elevated creatine kinase may indicate muscle disorder. This is true. Creatine is produced by muscle. So if you have got elevated creatine kinase, the enzyme, then that would indicate a problem with the muscle. Subtilius and glycosidase can be used to cleave bonds in peptide and carbohydrate respectively. This is true. Subtilius cleave peptide bonds. Glycosidase cleave carbohydrate bonds. So that is true. Class 3 enzymes do not require a cofactor. This is true. Class 3 and class 4 enzymes do not require a cofactor. The rest, class 1 up to 6, apart from 3 and 4, will require a cofactor. Beriberi may be caused by vitamin B1 deficiency. This is true. That is what causes beriberi. Which of the following statements about cyclization of monosaccharides are true? The aldehyde or ketone of monosaccharide reacts with hydroxyl group to form hemiketo and hemiacetal derivatives respectively. This statement is not true because aldehyde, when it reacts with hydroxy, it will form hemiacetal, not hemiketo. And ketone, when it reacts with hydroxyl, it will form hemiketo, not hemiacetal. In ketohexose sugars, the ketone group react with the hydroxyl group of C5 position to form a closed ring. This is true. What happens is that when you are talking about a carbohydrate, ketohexose, this carbohydrate has got 6 carbons, but it's a ketone. So the carbon containing the functional group, that is carbon number 2, will react with the second from last carbon. If something has got 6 carbon, meaning that carbon number 5, okay, it will react with it to form a ring. How does sugar in pyranose ring form a more stable is more stable than its furanose? This is true. Pyranose is more stable. Pyranose looks like this. It's more stable than furanose. The furanose looks like this. In aldohexose sugar, the aldehyde group reacts with hydroxyl group of at C4 to form a closed ring. This is not true because this is aldohexose. Hexose meaning 6 carbons. The second from last carbon is C5. So what would have reacted with C4 to form a ring is aldopentose because it has got 5 carbons. So the second from last carbon will be C4. The separation of opposing electrical charge on opposite sides of a molecule is called, that is known as polarity. When you have got a molecule at one end is positive, at another end is negative, that is known as polarity. The equilibrium constant will be high in hexagonic reaction where the dash are favored. As we said earlier, let's say we have got A going into B. Now for reaction to be hexagonic, it means that delta H is negative. For negative delta H to be seen, it means that the product has got low energy while the reactant has got high energy, because delta H is energy of the product minus reactant. Now, according to Le principle, reactions want to move in a direction that will reach equilibrium. So if you have got high and low, the reaction wants to go in this direction so that the high can balance with the low. Let's say, for example, on the reactant you have got 20 joules, on the product you have got 15 joules. The reaction will be going forward so that energy reaches equilibrium. So this statement is saying the equilibrium constant will be high in an hexagonic reaction where the dash are favored. So here it is the product are favored, or the forward reaction is favored. Penicillin acts by covalently modifying transpeptidase, thereby preventing the synthesis of bacterial cell wall and thus killing the bacteria. This is an example of. Now, penicillin, as you can hear, it does what? Covalently modifies transpeptidase. Transpeptidase, what happens that for a bacteria to be able to function, a bacteria has got a cell, and that cell is made up of peptidoglycan. Peptidoglycan is made up of carbohydrate chains which are interlinked by amino acids like that. Now, for these amino acids which form close linkages to be able to form close linkages, you need transpeptidase. So what happens that penicillin is going to be able to modify transpeptidase, and it cannot do that. And actually, it modifies the non-active site. So say this is transpeptidase. So what penicillin will come and do is to bind to this site, which is the allosteric site, and that to modify the active site. But if you want the function of transpeptidase to continue, then you are going to increase the concentration of the substrate. So uh, this reaction is supposed to, because if where you increase the concentration of the substrate and then the enzyme still does that function, it is a reversible reaction, irreversible non-competitive inhibition. But for penicillin, immediately you change the function, immediately you modify transpeptidase, you can't reverse it. So that is irreversible non-competitive inhibition. Which of the following statements about micelles are true? Micelles are these compounds formed like this. You are going to see that for lipids, the polar end will face water, the non-polar ends will face the inside. So it goes like that. So what is going to happen? They are formed when amphipathic compounds are mixed in water. This is true. Amphipathic compounds are compounds that are both hydrophobic and hydrophilic. The hydrophilic regions form hydrogen bonds with water. That's true. The heads are hydrophilic, so they form hydrogen bonds with water here. The non-polar regions are held together by hydrophobic interaction. This is also true. This inside, these are non-polar, so they are going to be joined by hydrophobic interactions. They are aggregates of non-polar molecules. This is also true. Micelles are going to be formed as an aggregation of non-polar molecules, as you can see there. Which of the following statements are true? Hydrogen is more electronegative than oxygen. Now, on the periodic table, you have got fluorine, you have got oxygen, nitrogen, you have got a phosphorus, you have got a sulfur, a chlorine, a bromine. You continue to go down. As you go towards fluorine, electronegativity is increasing because fluorine is the most electronegative. So hydrogen is less electronegative than nitrogen, it is less electronegative than oxygen. So the statement is true. Hydrogen is less electronegative than oxygen. This one is true. Hydrogen is more electronegative than nitrogen. That's not true. It's more electropositive, not electronegative. Name the class of enzymes involved in the transfer of groups within molecules to yield isomeric forms. Now, enzymes have got 6 classes. You can use the mnemonic or slew. Okay, this is a simple mnemonic that we can be able to use to tell the classes of enzymes. Now, what does each one of these mean? The O is representing oxidoreductase. Oxidoreductase, these ones are involved in oxidation reduction reaction, that's class 1. And then the T here is representing transferases. These are involved in those reactions that transfer electrons like that, or transfer compounds, let me say, not electrons. And then the H here is the hydrolases. They're involved in hydrolysis reactions. Now you have got two L's, right? You have got two L's. You need to know the which L is which one. But the first L is always a lyase. So these ones are lyases, and lyases are involved in reaction that involve removal of groups from a double bond. I mean to form a double bond. And then I is the isomerases. These are involved in reactions that form isomers. The L here is the ligase, involved in reaction that joins two molecules. So you need to know the group and the enzyme there. I mean the class. This is class 1, class 2, class 3 up to class 6. Class 3 and class 4, they do not require coenzymes. The rest require coenzyme. So here we want to use isomeric forms. So those are isomerases. Dash is a heteropolysaccharide made up of alternating units of any any acetylglucosamine and hydrochloric acid. Now, the combination of any acetylglucosamine and uronic acid forms a glycosaminoglycan. Now, there are different forms of glycosaminoglycans depending on the kind of uronic acid that you are going to use. So, if the uronic acid you use is aldoric acid, that glycosaminoglycan that you have formed is having a special name, and that is heparin. Heparin. So just make sure that you know the other types of glycosaminoglycans and what they are made up of. Which of the following statement is true? Allosteric enzyme partially obeys Michaelis-Menten kinetics. Allosteric enzymes do not obey Michaelis-Menten kinetics. The Michaelis-Menten kinetics, the equation there is 1 over VO is equal to Km over Vmax multiplied by the concentration 1 over the concentration of the substrate plus 1 over Vmax. So this equation is in the form y is equal to mx plus c. So the y-axis is going to be represented by 1 over VO. Gradient m is represented by Km over Vmax. And then x is by 1 over concentration of S. And then the y-intercept c is 1 over Vmax. So x-axis intercept, the x-intercept is going to be represented by negative 1 over Km. So not by Vmax, that's not true. Methotrexate, an anti-cancer drug that binds to the same site as tetrahydrofolate, is an example of competitive reversible inhibitor. So this statement is really not okay. Let's look at it properly. Methotrexate, an anti-cancer drug. Okay, for this one, this is actually true. Methotrexate is a competitive inhibitor. In other words, it competes on the binding site where tetrahydrofolate is supposed to bind. So it's a competitive inhibitor. You can reverse it if you increase the concentration of the substrate. High Km indicates weak binding. This is also true. Low Km indicates strong binding. Which of the following is or are correct? Mass spectrometry can be used to identify the type and amount of fat in a sample. Is this statement true or not? This statement is true. That is what mass spectrometry does. It is there to make sure that you identify the type and amount of fat in a sample. High performance liquid chromatograph can be used as quantitative tool to analyze fats. Is that true? So this statement is also true. Chromatograph can be used to be able to quantitatively analyze fats. Quantitative analysis means you want to find out how much of fat you have, right? How much of fat. Membrane liquid lipids should be dissolved in chloroform in order to analyze them. Is that true? This is true. For membrane lipids, you have to be able to dissolve them in chloroform to analyze them. And then D, saturated and unsaturated fatty acids with the same number of carbon atoms will have similar boiling points. Really not true. So normally saturated fatty acids are going to be solids at room temperature and saturated ones are going to be liquids. So saturated ones require a more energy to be in order to boil than unsaturated ones. Which of the following statement is false? High temperature can be used to break hydrogen bonds of peptides. Is that true? So remember we want a statement that is false. So this statement is actually false. So it is going to be an answer. High temperature will be used to break hydrogen bonds of peptides. Okay, what is a peptide? A, this statement should actually be true. A peptide is a molecule that is made up of peptide bonds. For example, you can have a monopeptide, a polypeptide. Now, this is the tricky part. Peptides are not joined by hydrogen bonds. They are joined by peptide bonds. So you'll not be able to break hydrogen bonds in them. That's why this is going to be an answer. It's false. Okay. Gel filtration technique can be used to separate proteins based on their different charges. Is that true? So this statement is also false. Gel filtration does not separate compounds on their charge, but on their size. Catecholamines are derived from tyrosine. This statement is true, so it can be an answer. They come from tyrosine amino acid. Amino acids are colorless because they do not absorb UV light. This statement is false. The reason as why amino acids are colorless is because they do not absorb visible light, not UV. Which of the following amino acids would elute first in a cation exchanger using pH buffer? So I've got aspartate and lysine. Now, how do you tell which one is going to be able to pass through using a cation exchanger? A cation exchanger is a method used to separate amino acids depending on their charge. Now, remember, is a cation exchanger, meaning that, say this is the cation exchanger, it is positively charged. Meaning that molecules that to be able to be separated or to be able to pass through this should be negatively charged because positive is attracted to negative. So in other words, you want to find out between aspartate and lysine at a pH of 7, what is their charge? Aspartate has a charge of 0, is neutral at a pH of 7, while lysine is positively charged. So lysine cannot easily pass through this cation exchange unless if it was an anion exchange, because the positive and the positive will be able to repel. So aspartate will be able to pass through faster, so it will be able to come through faster. So that is going to be the answer. So just make sure that you check through some charges of amino acid. Select the correct statements or statement that accurately describe the equilibrium constant of a reaction. When equilibrium constant is negative, a reaction will move in the forward direction. Now, when you're talking about equilibrium, let's say we have got A going into B. Okay, like that. Equilibrium is where the concentration of the product, the concentration of the reactant is equal. Let's say the concentration of the product is 2, concentration of the reactant is 1. How can you find K? K is given by the concentration of the product over the concentration of the reactant, so that will be 2 over 1, which is a 2. So if K is positive, it means that the reaction should move in a opposite direction. Why? Was according to Lecture's principle, we want to reach a point whereby the concentration of the reactant and the product are equal, right? So looking at this one, when equilibrium constant is negative, a reaction will move in the forward direction. favoring formation of products. Is that true? We want what is accurate to describing our statements. Now, this one I talked about here, this is not K because the concentration of the reactant and the product are not the same. That's not K. This is actually known as the reaction quotient. All right. But when we are talking about K, what we need to know, please take note, if Q, the reaction quotient, is greater than K, then the reaction will move in opposite direction. It will go behind. It will favor the formation of reactant. If Q is less than K, the reaction will go forward. If Q is equal to K, then the reaction is at equilibrium. But we are talking about K itself. So when K is less than 1, this will be the same as change in Gibbs free energy being positive. K being less than 1 meaning that it is negative, right? And Gibbs free energy is going to be positive. This reaction is going to release heat. Okay. I mean, this reaction is going to be non-spontaneous, so it goes in a reverse direction. Every time delta G is positive, that reaction is not spontaneous. But when K is greater than uh, a 0, meaning that it is positive. What will that mean? That will mean that delta G is actually negative because these are opposites. When K is positive, delta G is going to be negative. When delta G is negative, that means that that reaction is spontaneous, so it will go forward. But when K is equal to 1, it means that delta G is 0, and that reaction is at equilibrium. So when equilibrium constant is negative, a reaction will move in the forward direction. Is that true? You can see when K is greater than 0, meaning that it's positive. Unless when K is less than 1, that's when it's negative, right? Actually, less than 0, not 1. Less than 0, that's negative. So when equilibrium constant is less than 0, the reaction will move in a backward direction. So it will favor the reactant. So the statement is not true. When equilibrium constant is 0, the reaction will have reached equilibrium. How about this statement? This statement is actually true. Okay, statement is true. And then let's look at C. When equilibrium constant is less than 1, it favors formation of product. Let's look at that. Less than 1 favors formation of product. That is true because the reaction is going forward, right? Actually, this is opposite. When equilibrium constant is less than, this statement here is greater than. So less than 1 is this one. It will favor formation of reactant, not product. So this is not true. Okay. And then when equilibrium constant is negative, it favors formation of reactants. Equilibrium constant negative meaning is less than 1, it favors the formation of reactants. This is the one which is true. In hexagonic reactions, the change in energy is dash as energy is released into the environment. So the change in energy, as we said, for hexagonic is negative, right? And so the energy is released into the environment. Which of the following acids is the strongest? So you are trying for you to tell about the strength of an acid. A strong acid has got a high Ka. Now Ka is opposite to pKa. So meaning that a strong acid is going to have a smaller pKa. So look at the acids here. Which one has the smallest pKa? That is going to be the strongest acid. So you can see 3.7, 4.2, 2.13. So this one here, 2.16, that is going to be the strongest acid. Lysozymes hydrolyze the beta 1, 4 glycosidic bond between N-acetyl glucosamine and N-acetyl uramic acid. True or false? Now, lysozyme is an enzyme that is found in tears. This enzyme can be able to break the bonds which are found in bacteria. And so bacteria, because those bonds found in bacteria are broken, bacteria can actually take in water and burst, and so it is destroyed. That is how tears protect us. Now, bacterial cell wall is made up of peptidoglycan. And the components of peptidoglycan It's made up of repeating units of any acetyl muramic acid and any acetyl glucosamine. So glucosamine is true, but this is any acetyl muramic. Supposed to be any acetyl muramic, not uramic. So this is not true. This one is false. Set 8, V max divided by 2 is equal to, when you're talking about the Michaelis Menten kinetics, you're going to see the reaction is going to go like that. There will be a point whereby even if you increase the concentration, okay, the concentration of the substrate, you can no longer increase the rate of the reaction. At that point, you have reached the maximum velocity that is known as Vmax. Now, if you divide Vmax by 2, you come here, Vmax over 2. That will take you to the concentration of the substrate at which half of the, almost half of the active sites have been occupied. That is known as Km. So Vmax divided by 2 is known as Km, where at which the point at which half of the active sites have been occupied. Select the options that correctly describe bioenergetics. 39. Bioenergetics, the production of high energy compounds in a living organism. This one is bioenergetic. Bioenergetic is just describing how you get to form and use energy. So the production of high energy compounds in a living organism, that is described in bioenergetic. The simultaneous anabolic and catabolic processes in a living organism. This is also through the breaking of compounds and making of compounds in a living organism. Of course, you are getting to produce energy in that. The reduction of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins to produce energy. This is also true. Production of energy. The conservation of energy by stepwise condition of energy-rich macromolecules, by stepwise oxidation of high energy molecules. This is also true. Okay, where energy is converted from one form to another. So it's all about energy. Mwenya spends most of her time studying. She suddenly begins to experience some central nervous system adverse effects and some vivid dreams. The family thinks Mwenya's uncle back in Kitwe is responsible for her behavior. Which of the following drugs is with such effects? Now, these are drugs for HIV, and the one which has got effect of problems in the central nervous system and then we had dreams of vivid dreams, that is effervescence. So that is the drug, HIV drug. In the last 24 hours, Mbamwabi had an affair with her boyfriend and she suspects him of being HIV positive. She quickly runs to UTH, adulthood infectious diseases. What is a likely drug that she went to get to prevent herself from being HIV positive? Now, after having sex, and then you suspect that someone has got HIV, the drug that you take in that condition is a PEP drug, okay, and that is a combination of tenofovir and emtricitabine, and is taken within 4 weeks. So that's the two combinations of PEP. Okay, PrEP is mostly taken like before having the intercourse. The following HIV proteins play a role in a viral replication by downregulating the expression of major histocompatibility complex MHC molecule on the surface of infected cells, thereby invading the immune cells. So the following HIV proteins play a role in viral replication, downregulating the expression of MHC molecule on the surface of infected cells. Now, what MHC cells are actually important. What happens that when HIV comes in, the MHC class will play a role in making sure that the HIV are tracked and then they can be destroyed. But HIV proteins will make sure that they they replicate the virus and then prevent the MHC class from working. And that part of the HIV that does that function is NEF. So that is it for this paper. Thank you so much for watching.